I continue. The Greeks adhering to simple injunction, know thyself. This is the most important philosophy that you should also keep in your mind. Kendini tanı anlamında kullanıyor. Know thyself. Thyself means yourself. Were strong in self-awareness, practical and perceptive, their early myths still challenge the modern mind, leading us to contemplate anew the spark of human fire. That means that human beings at that time, became so ardent, became so interested to learn more and more, more and more. So, in this sense, they were getting educated, they were getting enlightened. The human fire to learn more, which Prometheus stole from Olympian gods to brighten the dim prehistoric soul. The depiction of human ills escaping from Pandora's box. Just remember those subjects that we covered in our last term. The pitiable cry of Lear Icarus, tumbling to his death in the blue Aegean waters, and Phaeton's youthful body pierced by his father's thunderbolt bring into focus the ever-present human failing of pride. So these are the happenings at that time, and there is much that separates the modern world from that earlier time. There are no fire sites decked with skins where audiences lose themselves in the singer's recounting of the epic struggles of Jason and Theseus. So, these are the main topics that we covered during at that time, and at that time people were so interested to learn, as we said before, and we come with the first name of that period, Homer. We start with his life and background as well. How did he become a poet, for example? There is no question that the writer of the Iliad and the Odyssey was one of the greatest poets in the history of Western Europe. So, in this sense, it was written mistakenly, not poets, but said poems. So, in the history of Western Europe, pay attention. Those two events, Iliad and the Odyssey, that you sent me your papers as homeworks, this was the first forerunners. These were the first examples, in a way, of a writer, Homer, that many great poets at that time, it might happen as well, took the main idea from them, and they also learned what happened in the history. But little else can be said with certainty about Homer. So we don't know much about Homer. A little bit is said about his lifetime, particularly concerning his personal life, especially his personal life cannot be learned. Obviously, he made his living as a bard. Just remember bard, minstrels, from your English literature lesson last term, Ozan, or rhapsode, forget about what it is, an itinerant singer of verses. Ancient Greek tradition, as well as a study of the language and style of the poems, indicates that, pay attention, he probably lived and wrote sometime in the ninth or 8th centuries BC. Before Christ, he is said to have lived and wrote some of his works between the ninth or 8th centuries, but no more definite date can be determined. In ancient times, pay attention, seven different cities claimed the honor of having been Homer's birthplace. So, seven cities say that Homer's birthplace were in different parts of Greece. None of these assertions can be validated, cannot be corrected, but more than likely he came from the island of Chios on the western coast of Asia Minor. Pay attention where Asia Minor is. For in historical times, a family of the same name lived there, claimed him as an ancestor, and devoted themselves to the recitation of his works. Seemingly, Homer was a native and a resident of some section of Asia Minor. So he's said to have lived in some section of Asia Minor. For the dialect he used, or in which he composed his works, it is a blend of Ionic and Aeolic. Just remember Ion, how we taught when we were doing our face-to-face lessons. Ionic and Aeolic is that of the Asian Greeks. So these dialects, Ionic and Aeolic, were the dialects of Asian Greeks, that they lived in our Aegean region. So in Homer's writings, he put a blend of that dialect, Asian Greek dialect he used. Tradition has visualized Homer as blind. He is said to be blind, but there is no real evidence for this belief. It is based upon the portrayal of Demodocus, a blind minstrel in the Odyssey, who sings a poem about the fall of Troy. There is no reason, however, to believe that the poet was describing himself in this scene. Throughout the two epics, Iliad and Odyssey, there is no consistent autobiographical information, and no other literature of the period survives which describes the poet. So, in the beginning of the second paragraph, his lifetime is not well described. A little is known about his life and his personal living times. So, the early Greeks unhesitatingly insisted that there had been a single individual named Homer. The old Greeks told that there was a man named Homer, to whom they ascribed the Iliad, that he had written Iliad and Odyssey, and several minor works, including the Homeric hymns. Pay attention and underline again. Hymns. What is that? A series of poems addressed to various gods. The Battle of the Frogs and Mice. A poem of 303 hexameters in a hexameter style way it was written. and Margaret's, a comic romance about the adventures of a simpleton. So these three are, besides Iliad and Odyssey, he wrote those poems. However, around the 3rd century BC, after his death, the so-called Homeric question was first propounded. So people started to think whether he lived or not, whether he wrote those works or not. Several of the grammarians of the time, because grammar was the main subject that was taught at the schools at that time, asserted that Iliad and the Odyssey were actually composed by two different writers. So there are some other thoughts that mostly many grammarians asserted this idea that the Iliad and Odyssey were not were not actually written by Homer, but they were written by two different writers. This is another assumption. At various times, this view has been supported by later European critics in the later times, in the later centuries. Some European critics accepted this assumption. There has also been a school of thought. Pay attention, it's important. School of thought, especially popular in the 19th century, which claims that there is another assumption that Homer, whose name means hostage, the name of Homer comes or means hostage, never existed. He never lived. And that the top two epics are the collective works of Iliad and Odyssey are the collective works of groups of anonymous bards. So some unknown bards wrote Iliad and Odyssey, they assume, assert, or they were revised whenever they were recited and didn't reach their present form until the 6th century BC. Just keep in your mind that it is said that Homer lived between 9th and 8th centuries, but this new assumption says that until the 6th century BC, those uh, works have not been known. When in Athens, they were written down for the first time. So in the 6th century BC, it is assumed that those works, Iliad and Odyssey, were written for the first time.